We have our folder structure and the base of our application ready to go. Let's start bringing in Angular 2. Under the app folder, create a new file, and we'll call it app.component.ts. Open up that folder. You can see that we have our new app component. Make sure that our server is running with npm start. That loads up our application. And also, we'll run TypeScript so that our component.js.map and our component.js get created. Let's create our very first Angular 2 component. We're going to use an ES6 import, and we want component from Angular's core. Now we can use this component, and that's a decorator, which really means we're going to add some metadata from this decorator, and we're going to add it to this class that we're exporting, app component. We're going to create a selector, and this is going to be how we use it in our application. We'll call the myAppSelector. In our app, we would actually be calling it using this. Just like that. And then we pass in a template. We'll use the backtick, which is the key on the left side of the number 1 on your keypad. And this is ES6 so that we can get multi-line strings. We'll do a Jumbotron class, since we already have some Bootstrap in there. H1, welcome to our app. All right, we have our very first Angular component. This is really the simplest you can get a component. You have the selector, you have the template, we can add in some styles as well. Let's throw a box shadow on there of 0, 2 pixels, 0, RGBA, and we'll do a light black. Save that. So if you're coming from Angular 1 and you've used Angular 1.5's component helper, this is going to seem very familiar to you. Our class is going to take the place of the Angular 1 controller. Our template is going to be the same, and our selector is going to be a new custom selector instead of using the ng controller, or if you're using UI router, you would pass in stuff through there. This way it's a little bit easier since everything is encapsulated into one component file. We could even, in the future, separate this out into its own template URL, and we can bring in a file that way, which we will do later in this course. But it's easy to see that the component is very similar to how a directive or the Angular 1.5 component helper works. All right, now we have our new Angular component. We have it called app component, and this will be the encompassing component that will hold all of our Angular 2 application. We need to do 2 things to actually use this. We need to create an Angular module, and then we need to bootstrap it so that we can use it in our app. Create a new file called app.module.ts. And a module is a way that we can encapsulate all of the different components of our application into one central location. This can be thought of as a good top-down view of this section of our app, and in the future we could have multiple modules to represent multiple different sections of our site. Right now we're going to have one app module, and we're going to have many components inside of that module. We'll import ng module. One thing that we need also is the browser module. And then let's import the app component that we just created. And since we exported it from that file, we're able to import it in this file. We can omit the TypeScript extension there, and we'll create the ng module. Imports is any other modules that we need to use. We'll use browser module here. We have declarations. And this is going to be the components that we're using in our app. Right now we're having app component. And then we'll bootstrap. We want to say this is the core component that we want to use, and that's app component. Then we can export class app module. Now we've created an app component. We've created an app module. Let's bootstrap it, which really means that we're going to use it in our application and start it up. In Angular 1, we would have used ng-app. Here, we're going to do this inside of a file called main.ts. And I know this app folder is getting crazy with TypeScript creating all of these files in here. In a couple lessons, we'll move all of this stuff out and clean it up when we start refactoring our code. Here's the bootstrap code. We're going to import platform browser dynamic from Angular. Then we need to import the app module that we have. And finally, we'll bootstrap it. That's everything we needed to bootstrap, create a component, and create a module. Now, I know that can seem a little daunting. What I like to do for my Angular 2 apps is have an app.component.ts, app.module.ts, and the main.ts be part of my starter kit. That way I don't have to do any of this and I can just get straight to the component building and the Angular 2 app that I want to build. Let's go look at the browser and see how our application is doing. We've changed a lot of code out and we need to make sure that all of it's working. All right, we're getting some errors, and notice that if we scroll to the top here, we can actually get some errors that make sense to us. This is the power that Angular 2 gives us over Angular 1, is that we know where the application is erroring and we're seeing our entire stack and where the problems are happening. Right now, we've bootstrapped our app using app component and the app module. So now it's looking for an my app selector to actually place our component in. We don't have one yet. We need to create that. Index.html. Down here for I am the app. We'll quickly replace that with my app. Now we're finally using the first Angular 2 app component that we built in our browser. No errors here. And here is our brand new Angular 2 application. Creating your first app component and your first app module and then bootstrapping it can also be seen as part of the Angular 2 setup. It does take a little bit of work to get up and running with it, but now that we are up and running, we can actually hit the ground running when we start to build out our app. For your own starter kits, I would suggest keeping that as part of the setup process so that you can just clone down a repo, have your first app component, your first app module already bootstrapped. Then you can just start building right away. Now we're in a really good place to start building our application. Let's look into how we can use Angular 2 to build out this application, where we have a list of users, we have user details. We can type into this user detail and see two-way data binding work. And then we can also create users. See some validation errors. Reset this form here. And all of these great things are really easy to do with Angular 2. Let's start getting into this and building this application.